Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We're going to be learning today B'Yetz Hashem Dav Ches Amid Aleph. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Chol HaMoed. We're in Siman Tov Kuf Lamed Zayin, and we pick up today on the top line of Ches Amid Aleph with Sif Zayin. Says the Mechaber, a little bit of a deceptively complicated Sif. Moishchin es hamayim me'ilon le'ilon. If you have a field of trees, so you have an orchard, let's say you have an apple orchard, and you need to water the trees. Now, watering fruit-bearing trees is considered a davar ha'ovid. It's considered like a stay beis hashlachin. It's like a field that has to be manually watered. If you do not water it properly, you will take a financial loss. So this is a davar ha'ovid on Chol HaMoed, and therefore the Mechaber says, what you are allowed to do is, you're allowed to, let's say you have a stream that runs next to the orchard, you're allowed to open up whatever you need to open up or unblock whatever you need to unblock to allow the water from the stream to flow into the orchard. And then what you can do is, at the base of each tree, there's a ditch around the base of the tree for water to pool in and collect. What you're allowed to do is, you can make, let's say with your foot, a channel from tree to tree, so that the water will go to one tree, the water will pool around the tree, then it'll go in the channel to the next tree, and to the next tree, and to the next tree, so on and so forth. And in that way, you could water your entire orchard, and it's not a tirchi yisera. All you're doing is making small channels from tree to tree. But the Mechaber says, Ubelvad shelo yashke es kol hasadeh. But what you are not allowed to do is you're not allowed to simply water the entire field. Now, what exactly is going on over here? What exactly is the mitzias? So first I want to point you to a biur halacha, dibra maschel me'ilon le'ilon, where the Chavetz Chaim brings down a ritva, ayin bechudushe ritva beritzgeus, shehatiku es divrei ha-Yerushalmi. They quote the Yerushalmi, Shekasav, where the Yerushalmi writes, the Divrei Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov. This halacha is coming from the words of Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov that we have in the Mishnah in the Bavli, but they bring down from the Yerushalmi, where the Talmud Yerushalmi writes, Sha'oiser lahashkois kol hasada kula mayri. This prohibition to water the entire field is speaking about a case, Kishahayu netuim ha'ilanois asara lebeisa, where you have 10 trees that are planted in an area of a beisa. A beisa is 2,500 square amas. So a beisa is a decent-sized field. And in that field, you only have 10 trees. Avalim hayurit sufais. But if there are many trees in the field, so that the trees are packed much more densely than that, then mutar lahashkais kol hasada l'kulei alma. Then you're allowed to water the entire field. So now that we have these facts, let's explain what it is exactly that we're speaking about here. We have an orchard, and we have trees that are spaced out inside this orchard, so that I have, let's say, 10 trees in 2,500 square amas. So I have quite a large field over here. Now, there's two different ways that I could water this field. First of all, I'm allowed to water the trees because the trees are considered a stay beis hashlachin, like I said at the beginning of this year. If I don't water the trees, I'm going to take a financial loss. So that's a davar ha'ovid. And therefore, I'm allowed to do the melachah of watering the trees as long as I don't do a tirchi yisera. As long as it's not a tirchi yisera, I'm allowed to water the trees. But how about the rest of the field? How about the field, the areas of the field that are outside the trees? Right? There's a lot of space between each tree. Am I allowed to water the area between the trees? What heter do I have to water that? First of all, according to many Rishonim, we're speaking about a case here where there is nothing really growing between the trees. It's not like I have an apple orchard and between the trees I have wheat growing or I have tomatoes and cucumbers growing. I have an apple orchard, and between the trees, I'm not using that to grow produce. Maybe there's grass growing there, but I'm not growing any crops over there. What heter do I have to water that ground? even if it's bare ground where I'm not watering anything, I'm still doing a melachah. I'm still doing either zareya, or it could be chayrish, like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say later on in the next sif. When you water, if you water bare ground, you're still doing a melachah. He says in where did it go? In Ois Kotlechav Tes in Sif Ches, it's like fertilizing a field. By watering the field, you're making the field more arable. It will grow. It will produce better. It's better suited for planting. So you're improving the ground by watering it. So I have no heter to water the ground. I only have a heter to water the trees. Watering the trees is a davar ovid, but to water the rest of the field, I don't have a heter. So therefore, the Mechaber says here in Sif Zayin, therefore there's what you can do and what you can't do. What you could do is, you could allow the water to flow around the base of a tree, and then you could make a channel so that the water should flow from one tree to the next, and thereby you will water all of your trees with a very lightweight tercha. It won't be a tercha yisera, so you're doing melachah for a davar ovid, and it's not a tercha yisera, and that's mutter. But you have no heter to water the rest of the sadeh. So let's say you had a situation where if you wanted, you could just unplug the stream and let the stream run into the orchard and flood the entire orchard. That you're not allowed to do, because you're doing melachah where it's not a davar ovid. You're doing melachah where you're watering the rest of the field, and the rest of the field you have no heter to water on Chol HaMoed. So that's why the Mechaber says here, you could make a little channel to divert the water so that the water should go from tree to tree, and thereby you will do the melachah for your davar ovid, and you will water all of your trees. However, you do not have a heter to water the rest of the field. That would be melachah, not for a davar ovid, and that you're not allowed to do. Now let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says in Ois Katan Chavav, Moishchenes Hamayim, Pirish, She'oisin Savev Ha'ilon Chafirois Lamalois Oisan Mayim. There were little ditches around the base of each tree for the water to pool up in, so that the tree should be watered properly. V'su ein bazeh tarech harbe lases chritz. Now, to just cut a little channel that will go from the base of one tree to the base of the next tree, there's not a lot of tercha involved in that. That's not a tercha merubah, that's not a tercha yisera, and whatever you're doing for a davar ovid to water the trees, that's mutter. But what you cannot do is, you can't simply water the entire field. Says the Mishnah Berurah, da'afim lo yashke kula, because if you don't water the entire field, lekap seidal ilanois, the trees are not going to get harmed by the fact that you didn't water the rest of the field outside of the trees. What the trees need is, the trees need the water that's going to pool up around their bases. But if you have 10 feet between each tree, you don't have a heter to water that intervening area between the trees. And the trees don't need those areas to be watered. There's lekap seidel ilanos. That's not a davar ovid. Da'avsha al yedei hahashka yeh harvacha leilanos. It's true that if you do water all of the rest of the areas of the field between the trees, that might be better for the trees. Let's remember that the roots of the trees do spread out very far. So yes, if you water the rest of the field, it's very possible that the roots of the trees will pick up water from those areas, but the trees don't need that. That's harvacha. That maybe will make the trees even better. But there's no pseida, there's no loss to the trees if you don't water those areas. Therefore, it's not a davar ovid, and you don't have no heter to do so. Leisharinan tercha rabba b'shvil harvacha. We're not matter you to do a tercha. Now, the words of the Chavetz Chaim are leisharinan tercha rabba b'shvil harvacha. We're not matter you to do excessive tercha for only harvacha. Now, notice that this is not the usual lashon of the Chavetz Chaim when he's describing a tercha yisera, excessive tercha. Usually he either uses the words tercha yisera or tercha merubah. Over here, somehow into the Mishnah Berurah crept in the word tercha rabba. However, I am forced to say that this word over here is lav dafka. The Chavetz Chaim does not mean to say here that the reason you can't water the rest of the field is because we're not matter you to do a tircha meruba for harvacha. We're not matter you to do any tircha for harvacha. We learned that already back in Sif Aleph, in this Siman. We said you're not allowed to water a stay base habal, because when you water a stay base habal, it's not a davar ha'avod. It only improves the field. We're not matter you to do melachah on Chol HaMoed to improve something for harvacha. We're only matter you in the case of a davar ha'avod. Over here, it's not a davar ha'avod. The trees are not going to get harmed by not watering the rest of the field. Therefore, you have no heter at all to water the rest of the field, even if it would be a tercha muetes. It's not really mutter. So loy sharinon tercha rabba, he's not saying that we're not mater tercha rabba, but we are mater tercha muetes. We're not mater any tercha. Loy sharinon tercha rabba b'shvel harvacha. We're not mater you to be matriach and to do melachah on Chol HaMoed for stam harvacha. Now I see I wrote down over here Dirshu footnote 17. I don't even remember what that was. Yeah, so this is just worthwhile seeing the first few lines of this footnote, footnote number 17. It just follows up on what I've explained over here. He brings down here from the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish Kasav, the Chazon Ish writes, Sheha Isser lahashka, he says, Kol Hasada, the prohibition to water the rest of the orchard, on Chol HaMoed, Nemar Gamim Acharitzim Kvar Kayomim, even if there are already irrigation canals that run to every area of the orchard. Verak Tzarich Lahaser Chasima Achas, and all you need to do to water the entire orchard, you have a plug. If you pull that plug, there's a little stoppage, a little dam, where the spring, the natural spring that runs next to the orchard is stopped up. If I remove that plug, the water will flow out of the spring and it will flood the entire orchard. So all I have to do is a tiny little tercha. I pull out a stone and I could water the entire orchard. Says the Chazon Ish, that's also, you're not allowed to do it. That would be, like I just told you, it would be being matriach and doing melachah on Chol HaMoed for something that is not a davar ha'avod. There simply is no heter at all to water the rest of the orchard. You only have a heter to water under the trees. Oh, we didn't do that yet. Okay, so far the Mechaber said, you have this orchard, you have a heter to water the trees, so you could bring water to the base of one tree, and you could do a lightweight tercha. You could cut a trench from tree to tree so that the water should flow from one tree to the next, to the next, to the next, and so on. However, you cannot water the rest of the field. Now the Mechaber gives you an exception to this rule. If the rest of the field is already wet, mutar lahashka, he says kula, then you are allowed to water the rest of the orchard. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here in Eis Katan Chav Ches, as kula, now you're allowed to water the rest of the field. The Mishnah Berurah says, why is this? Since the rest of the field is already wet from water, ein ba tayrach yoser al yedei hahashka. Now, there's no additional tercha necessary for watering the rest of the orchard. Now, I have to tell you that I don't know where this is coming from. I mean, I know where it's coming from. If you take a look in the Sha'ar Tzion, Eis Katan Chav Gimel, Eis Katan Chav Hey. Yeah, Sha'ar Tzion, Eis Katan Chav Hey, you'll see that the Sha'ar Tzion brings this down from the Rambam. And indeed, this is the lashon of the Rambam. The Rambam gives a few different cases where you have a heter to water a field on Chol HaMoed, and he gives a few different things, and he says all of these ein bahem tircha. There's no tircha involved in them. So somehow the Rambam is saying that if the rest of the orchard is already wet, somehow there's no tircha, there's no additional tircha whatsoever involved, whether you're going to water only under the base of the trees or you're going to water the entire orchard. Now, I don't know what the mitzvah is over here. I don't know why it should be that way. I've been puzzling over this. Basically, we're saying there is no heter to water the rest of the orchard because it's not a davar oven. Yet, if the rest of the sadeh is already wet, now you're allowed to water the rest. Now, the only thing I could think is that the mechaber is telling you over here, it's not pshat that now you have a heter to water the rest of the sadeh. In my mind, what I'm thinking is like this. It could be, especially in light of this Chazon Ish that we saw in Dirshu footnote number 17, it could actually be that it would take less tircha to water the entire orchard than it would to water under the base of the trees. If you wanted to water the entire orchard, maybe all you would have to do is unstop the spring and simply let the water run out and flood the entire orchard. Now that you're going to water from the base of one tree to the base of the next, you have to actually go and make the trenches going from one tree to the next. Yet, in the beginning of Siv Zayin over here, the Mechaber said, that's precisely what you have to do. Why do you have to do that? Because you have no heter to water the rest of the field. Maybe, in my mind, I'm trying to think, maybe if the rest of the field is wet, maybe that doesn't apply. Maybe if the rest of the field is wet, what was I thinking? If the rest of the field is wet, maybe by unstopping the spring and letting it flow, if the rest of the sadeh is dry, that's what I was thinking. If the entire orchard is dry, then maybe you have to unstop the spring, let the water flow into the orchard, but since the orchard is dried out, you don't know that the water is actually going to get to each tree, because the water is going to go into a very dry area, and maybe the water is just going to get absorbed into the ground. So maybe as the water comes into the orchard, anyway, you have to be busy making sure that the water gets to each tree. In that case, you are doing a certain amount of extra tircha in the fact that you're watering the rest of the dried out orchard. But if the entire orchard is already wet, maybe the water by itself will just spread out all over. I don't know, maybe this is something we have to ask a farmer. But in any case, there's a lot more complexity that lies behind this sif than what I've told you, because there's a whole machlokes rishonim discussing, is there anything planted in the rest of the orchard? Is there not anything planted in the rest of the orchard? This is the simplest way, and this is the way that the Chavetz Chaim is learning. This is a Mishnah Berurah here, and clearly the Mishnah Berurah is learning like these rishonim, and the Mishnah Berurah is following the lead over here of the Rambam. So the Rambam says that if the rest of the field is wet, you're allowed to water the entire field, and he says because there's no tircha. As far as the melachah, that you're watering the rest of the field, you don't have kavana to water the rest of the field. You don't have kavana to water the rest of the field. That's not your intent. Your intent is only to water the trees. And it could even be, like we're going to see later, it could even be that it's muchach, that it's clear to people that what you're doing is you're watering the trees, because the trees are the only thing that you have in the field that requires watering. We're talking about a case here where you're not growing any crops in the rest of the orchard. So if somebody looks at what you're doing, he realizes that you're only going to water the trees. So really, there's probably no problem of melachah here, strictly speaking at all. It's really only a problem of tercha. I didn't even realize this when I prepared the shir. It's really only a question of tercha. You have a heter to water the trees because that's a davar of it if you don't water the trees. As far as watering the rest of the field, that lechera is only a problem of tircha. It's not a problem of melachah. Why am I saying it's not a problem of melachah? Because you have no intent in doing that melachah. You have no kavana to water the rest of the field. There's nothing there that you want to water. And even though it's a psik ratio, we're going to see soon that according to most, a psik ratio is not a problem. If it's a davar shalom miskaven, a davar she'ein miskaven, a psik ratio is not a problem on Chol HaMoed. So it's not a malacha issue. It's only a tercha issue. And if so then what the Mechaber is telling you is, in the beginning of the sif, the Mechaber is telling you that you could only be moishech the mayim from Elon to Elon. You could only concentrate on watering the trees. You can't expend any tercha on watering the rest of the sadeh. But if the rest of the sada is already wet, you see, now I'm thinking, if the rest of the sada is already wet, then maybe there's no tercha involved in watering the rest of the sada, because what do you mean? You're not going to pay attention to it at all. It's already wet. I'm not here to water the rest of the sada, and the rest of the sada is already wet. So I'm b'chalal not expending any interest or paying any attention to the rest of the sada. Okay, let's go to Sifches. Now, even though you don't see this in the words of the Mechaber beginning with Sifches is changing tracks a little bit. Until here in Sifches, we were really discussing the halachos of a davar ha'avod. What are you allowed to do because of a davar ha'avod? And we couched the whole discussion, we framed the whole discussion in the context of watering fields. Now the Mechaber is going to continue with this, but now really the Mechaber is discussing something else. The Mechaber is now going to discuss what happens if you're doing a melachah that you're allowed to do on Chol HaMoed. It's tzarech hamoed, maybe it's even tzarech eichel nefesh. So it's a melachah that you're allowed to do, but by doing that melachah, it may look like you're also doing another melachah. Is that a problem or not? And what do you have to do to solve that problem? So take a look here. The Mechaber says in Sifches, Aser liftayach makaim l'sadeh kedei sheyikansu b'mayim lahashkaisa. Okay, let's say we have a stay base habal. We have a field that does not require any manual watering. This field gets enough watering from rainwater. And therefore, like we've said since the beginning of the Siman, you're not allowed to water this field on Chol HaMoed because it's not a davar ha'avod. So you're not allowed to water this field on Chol HaMoed. Therefore, given, also liftayach makom l'sada kidei sheyikansu b'mayim lahashkaisa. If this field has a stream next to it, and all you have to do is unblock the stream and the water will flow into the field, you're not allowed to do that because you're not allowed to water a stay base habal on Chol HaMoed. Okay, why is the Mechaber discussing this? This is obvious. Because now let's see what the Mechaber says. There's a reason why you want to do this. Let's say I have no interest. I know I'm not allowed to water this field on Chol HaMoed, and I'm not coming to water the field. What I want to do is I want to trap fish. What I want to do is I want to unblock the stream. The stream has fish in it. And by unblocking the stream, the water is going to flow into my field, and fish are going to come together with the water. And then a lot of fish are going to end up getting trapped in my field. They're going to flow out with the water. There's not going to be enough water. They're going to be laying on the ground, and now I have fish for Yom Tov. So now the Mechaber says, the given is that you're not allowed to water your field. But let's say you're doing this because you want to trap fish so that you should eat them. It's a tzarech hamoed, and we said you're allowed to fish on Chol HaMoed l'tzarech hamoed. But now there's another problem, and the problem is that somebody who sees what you're doing, they don't know that what you're doing is you're trying to trap fish. To them, it looks like you're watering your field. So continues the Mechaber. Kigoyin shepaiseach lamayla makam sheyikansu ulamata makam sheyetzu mutter. If you do it in a way where it will be obvious to the onlookers that you're doing this to trap fish, for example, says the Mechaber, if your field is on a little bit of a slope and you unplug the stream that's at the top of the slope, at the top of the field, so that the water could flow down into your field. And then you also make an opening on the bottom of the field where the water is going to flow out, so that the water is not going to pool in your field. The water is going to come in, the fish are going to get stuck in your field, and the water is going to flow out. Then it's mutter. So basically the halacha that the Mechaber came to tell me over here is like this. You're not allowed to water your stay base habal on Chol HaMoed. We've already discussed that, we know that. But you are allowed to trap fish on Chol HaMoed. So let's say you want to allow a stream to overflow into your stay base habal, not in order to water the stay base habal, but to trap fish in the stay base habal. You're allowed to do that if you do it in a way where onlookers who see what you're doing will realize that you're not doing it to water your field. They'll realize that you're doing it to catch fish. In that case, it's mutter. But if you would not open up an opening at the bottom of your field for the water to run out, now an onlooker is going to see you unstopping the stream and allowing your field to flood, and he will think that you're doing it to water your field. In that case, it would be aser. Now let's see the Mishnah Berurah inside. The Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chavtes. Kadesha yikansu b'mayim. You're not allowed to open up. You're not allowed to open something up to allow water to come into your field and flood your field. Even if we're talking about a sadeh where you don't have crops growing, you're still not allowed to do this, because it's definitely a melachah. By allowing your field to flood with water, you're improving the ground and making it better, making it more efficient for planting things. So that would be the melachah of chayrish or the melachah of zereah. You're not allowed to do that. But ois katan lamid, if you did it in order to catch fish, kedei la'achlan, if you're b'moyed, if you're doing this to trap fish in your field so that you'll be able to eat them on Yom Tov, then if you do it in such a way that it'll be obvious to the onlooker that that's why you did it, then it's mutter. Says the Chavetz Chaim, he brings in a little bit of a side point. Says the Chavetz Chaim, ayin bebeis meir, take a look at the beis meir, shedaitoi, his opinion is, if you would do this on Chol HaMoed, in order so that you could hang on to all of these fish for after Yom Tov, that would be aser, because then you're trapping fish, you're doing the melachah of tzeda, not l'tzarech hamoed. You're doing it for the tzarech of achar hamoed. You're not allowed to do that. But as long as you want to eat some of the fish, you might catch 50 fish, you might only eat 2. The Beis Meir says, as long as you're going to eat some of the fish, shaper dummy, it's okay. And the truth is that this is very similar to what we learned earlier in Taf Lamed Gimel, I think. In Taf Kuf Lamed Gimel, we said that you're allowed to go fishing. You're allowed to go fishing on Chol HaMoed, and you're even allowed to catch more fish than you really need. Because if you remember, we said the fish are not equal one to the other. So as you catch more fish, you might catch a nicer one for Yom Tov. You might catch a nicer one for Yom Tov. So you're allowed to catch even extra fish. Therefore, says the Beis Meir, this interesting mode of fishing, where you're going to allow the stream to flood into your field and you're going to get the fish trapped in your field, it's mutter even if you're going to trap 50 fish and only eat 2, because you're going to eat the best 2, and you never know which one's going to be the best. Ulam, however, continues the Chavetz Chaim, mi Berurah, from what's written in the Berurah in the Shulchan Aruch, he compares this to the halacha that we have in Moed Katan and Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, hadashashois, those who thresh grain on Chol HaMoed, oisin bitzina l'tzarech hamoed, they're allowed to thresh the grain bitzina for the needs of Yom Tov. Visham, and over there, in regards to that halacha, halokasav ha-mechaber la'el b'simin Tav Kuf Lamed Gimel Sif Aleph, the mechaber wrote the Tav Kuf Lamed Gimel, shalo yarim litchain yoser b'kavana, that you're not allowed to thresh or grind extra flour as a harama. You can't go and say, I'm going to grind 50 pounds of flour for after the moed. I only need a pound of flour now for Yom Tov. I'm going to grind 50 pounds of flour. That's a harama that you're not allowed to do. So, according to this Berurah, it would seem that he differs with the Beis Meir. If you're stopping up, if you're allowing the stream to flood your field and you're going to catch 50 fish and you only need 2, that would seem to be the same thing. Achein, however, the Mishnah Berurah does point out, Din harama gufa lav milsa berera hila isser ayin sham. In Tav Kuf Lamed Gimel, we said it's not so pashut that this harama is even usser. So the Prima Godim is also mesupik by this halacha over here. Are you allowed to trap a lot of fish in your field, even if you're only going to eat a couple of them, or do you have to eat all of them? Ais Katan Lamed Aleph, the Mechaber said, if you do this trapping in a way where it's going to be obvious to everybody that your goal over here is to trap fish and not to water your field, then it's okay. But what you have to do is you have to have an opening at the top of the field where the water comes in, and another opening at the bottom of the field where the water flows out. Then it's obvious to everybody that you're not doing it for the water, you're doing it for the fish. The Chavetz Chaim says, the reason you have to do this is, even though your kavana is only to trap fish. So, if your kavana is only to trap fish, why do you have to do it in such a way that it should be obvious to everybody that you're only trapping fish? You're the one doing the melachah. The melachah l'chayr is mutter. You're doing it in order to catch fish. And even though it's a psik reisha that you're also going to water your field, that's not a problem, because a psik reisha on Chol HaMoed is not a problem. Still, says the Chavetz Chaim, be'inan shiyu maisav nikarim. It has to be recognizable to everybody that what you're doing is mutter, that what you're doing is you're trapping fish, not watering your field. Lakach yesh liftayach shnei psachim. And therefore you have to open up two openings for the water, one for the water to come in and one for the water to go out. Hachad Pesach, but if you only open up one opening, even though your intent, your kavana is only to trap fish, not to water your field, aser, this would be forbidden. Since it's not recognizable what you're doing, and it appears, it looks like you're watering your field on Chol HaMoed. The Kasav Ritva b'chidushav, the Ritva writes in his chidusham alashas, the kol zerak le'inyanis lechatchila. This is only also lechatchila. Aval b'di'eved, if you only used one opening and you let the water come in and you trapped the fish, but you also trapped the water, so you didn't do it the way you were supposed to, we don't penalize somebody who did that. If the person says, look, I didn't know that I had to open up two openings to make it obvious to everyone. I knew that my kavana is for a davar mutter. My kavana was in order to trap fish. I didn't know that I have to do a maisa to show everybody that what I'm doing is mutter. Then we don't penalize him and we allow him to use the fish. And the same thing applies to the coming seifim that all discuss very similar halachos to this one. Now, the question is, why is this that your maisim have to be nicker? Why is it that it's not enough that your kavana is for something that's mutter? It has to be obvious to everyone that it's mutter. Is it only a question of a yisem nikiyah mi Hashem and mi Yisrael, that everybody should realize that what you're doing is a davar heter? It seems that it's more than that. So, I think it's a Magen Avram who says that the reason why we have a greater problem over here is because over here, you are watering your field. It's very nice that your kavana is that you're doing it to trap fish, but you're doing a maisa in the sadeh. You are flooding your field with water. So it's not just somebody who sees what you're doing might think that you're doing a davar aser. No, you are doing a davar aser. You're watering your field on Chol HaMoed and you're not allowed to water your field on Chol HaMoed. The reason it's mutter is because it's a davar she'eino miskaven. Because you have no kavana, you have no intent for watering your field. It's a psik reisha, and we know that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, usually a psik reisha is aser, right? On Shabbos, if it's a davar she'eino miskaven, you go out to your backyard and you want to wash the tilas yadayim over your grass. I have no intent on watering the grass. Very nice, but it's a psik reisha that the grass is going to get watered. So that's also because it's a psik reisha. That's on Shabbos and Yom Tov, not on Chol HaMoed. On Chol HaMoed, a psik reisha is not aser. So as far as the melachah, there's no iser. But the person who sees what you're doing, what he sees is you are watering your field on Chol HaMoed, and you're not allowed to water your field on Chol HaMoed. So therefore, because you mamish are doing a davar aser, it's not a question that somebody who's looking doesn't realize. You're watering your field. That's what you're doing. So you have to do something that makes it obvious to all that, no, that's not my kavana. Somebody who looks says, no, he's not watering his field, he's trapping fish. It's very obvious that he's trapping fish. That's why over here you need to go an extra mile to show. There has to be something about your maisa that shows that what you're doing is a dvar heter, not a dvar iser. Ice cotton limud bays. You have to open up 2 openings in the field, one on top for the water to come in and one on bottom for the water to go out. Or lamata makim sheyetzu, says the Chavetz Chaim. Tahainu she'oisa sham chor katan. You have to make a small opening. Sheyazuvu amayim misham, so that the water should flow out. V'yisharu hadagim nitzaydin me'alein. And now the fish will end up trapped inside the field. The water comes in, the water flows out through a small opening in the wall on the bottom of the field, and the fish can't fit through. So it's like you're straining the fish in the field. And even though lamaisa, your field is going to get watered, shari, it's mutter. Why? The davar she'ein miskavenu, because it's a davar she'ein miskaven, and like it's, even though it's a psik reisha on Chol HaMoed is mutter. And by the way, you can see that in Dirshu footnote number 20. Okay, now we go to Sif Tes, a very similar halacha. Says the Mechaber. Aser lahashvais hasadeh l'tzarech harisha. You're not allowed on Yom Tov. Let's say you have a field, and the field is very bumpy. It has high spots and low spots, and it has rocks and this and that. If you wanted to plant crops in this field, the first step that you would have to do is you would have to level it. Before you can even plow it, you have to level it. You have to take out the mounds, you have to take out the big rocks. Then you could take the plow and you could break furrows and you could plow the field. Now, to clear out a field and level a field on Chol HaMoed is aser. That's avodas hakarka. It's probably a told of chayrish, and you're not allowed to do that on Chol HaMoed. So again, says the Mechaber in Sif Tes, also lahashvais hasadeh, you're not allowed to go ahead and level out a field l'tzarech harisha, in order to prepare it for harisha. That's something that you're not allowed to do in Chol HaMoed. But there could be another reason why you're doing this. Let's say you need flour for Yom Tov. Now, one of the first steps in the preparation of flour is you need to take the grain and you need to thresh the grain. You need to beat the grain to break the chaff, to be able to remove the kernels from the chaff. How would they do that? They would prepare a threshing floor. What's a threshing floor? A nice, smooth, firmly packed area of ground was used as a threshing floor. So you're not allowed to go ahead and level out ground on Chol HaMoed in order to prepare it for plowing. But you are allowed to level out ground in your field to use it as a threshing floor. So says the Mechaber, also lahashvais hasadeh l'tzarech harisha. You're not allowed to level out an area of your field to prepare it for plowing. But you are allowed to do it as a threshing floor. If it's obvious to all that you're leveling out this ground to prepare it as a threshing floor, kigoyin, for example, shemashve kula, that you go and you level out a nice big area, mutter, then it's permissible. Now, there's a shaila in the Gersais, there's a machlekes rishonim, how to learn this Gemara in Moed Cotton on Daf Yud. I believe it's on Daf Yud Amud Beis. It's a hard piece of Gemara. The Mechaber is coming off of the Gemara, and I think the Rambam. I'm not 100% sure. No, he's following the Pirush of Rashi in the Gemara over there in Moed Cotton, where he's learning that if you flatten out a larger area of the field, somehow that makes people realize that you're doing it as a threshing floor. If you do a smaller area, it looks like you're preparing it for plowing. Now, as the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out, that sounds counterintuitive. I would think that if I'm preparing a small area, all right, he's not doing it for plowing. He needs a place to thresh his grain. If he's doing the whole field, then it looks like he's preparing it for plowing. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah here, Ois Cotton Lamed Gimel. Kegoin shemashve kula. You need a larger area as a threshing floor than you need for plowing. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, many Rishonim learn this quite the opposite. And they say that no, if you want to make it obvious that you're using a threshing floor, you prepare a smaller area. And therefore, since we have this machlokes Rishonim, both of them are aser. You're not allowed to smooth out a small area. You're not allowed to smooth out a big area. Okay, but again, the point The halacha of siftes is the same in essence. It's the same concept as the halacha of sifches, which is there's something that you're not allowed to do, but you might do that same maisa for a different reason, which is mutter. But in that case, you have to make it obvious to everybody that you're doing it for the mutter reason, not for the asur reason. And now again, let's go to Sif Yud. We're going to have a very similar halacha. Says the Mechaber, asur lelaket eitzim min hasadeh, you're not allowed to go around your field and collect small branches and twigs, liapoisai lacharisha. If you were doing this in order to get the field ready for plowing, so you're taking all of this debris off the ground before you plow it, that would be asur on Chol HaMoed. But but if you make it obvious that you're doing this because you need to collect wood, because you need to make a fire to cook, for example, you take the larger twigs, which are good for burning, and you leave the little small pieces, then mutter. So again, we have the same thing. Going around your sadeh and collecting the debris to prepare it for plowing is asur. Going around your field and picking up the twigs to use it for burning, for cooking is mutter. So if you go out to collect twigs for burning, for cooking, you have to do it in such a way that it's obvious to the onlookers that you're doing it for the mutter dika reason. And on this Sif, we have no Mishnah Berurah. Now we go to Sif Yud Aleph. Again, very much the same idea. Asur lekatzeitz anfi ha'ilon l'saknoi. You're not allowed to prune your trees on Chol HaMoed. You're not allowed to cut off branches to prune the tree and make the tree healthier. That's not a davar ha'ovid. It's melachah on Chol HaMoed. That's not for a davar ha'ovid. You're not allowed to do it. But if you might want to pull little fresh branches off of the tree because your animals like to eat that, the soft green shoots of the tree. So maybe you're not pruning your tree. Maybe you're breaking that off to feed it to your animal. Feeding your animal is mutter. That's a davar ovid. You have to feed your animal on Yom Tov. So if you make it obvious that that's what you're doing, v'loy l'sakdai, and you're not doing it for the benefit of your tree, for example, let's say you take all the branches that you want off of one side of the tree. So now you're making the tree imbalanced. That's not the proper way to prune a tree. So then people realize, oh, he's not pruning his tree. He's breaking off young shoots to give to his animals. Then mutter. Then it's mutter. I've cut in Lamed Dalet. V'im nikar shemachavin b'shvil ha'anofim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, u'bechol hadvarim ha'elu. All of these halachos that are very similar one to the other. V'chayotza b'zeh tarti b'inon. In all of these cases, there are two factors that are required to render what you're doing permissible. First of all, you have to have true intent for the thing that's mutter. So, if you're going ahead and you're bringing water into your field, you have to really be doing it to trap fish. You can't be doing it to water your field. If you're picking up twigs and branches from your sadeh, it has to be that you're doing it because you need kindling, not that you're doing it to prepare your field for plowing. So your kavana really has to be laheter. That's factor number one. That's the first requirement, the first prerequisite. The second one is and your maisim, the actions that you're doing, it has to be obvious to the onlookers. It has to be obvious to the onlooker that you're doing it for the purpose of heter. So the onlooker has to see, oh, he has an opening at the bottom of the field where the water is going to run out. He's not allowing the water to pool up in his field. Obviously, he's doing it to trap fish, not to water the field. He has to see, oh, he's collecting big pieces, small pieces. He's only collecting larger twigs that are good for kindling. He's not clearing all the debris out of his field. So obviously, he's not doing it to prepare the field for plowing. Obviously, he's doing it instead because he needs kindling. So you need both of these factors. Avalim kavanasa li'isr, but if the person is really doing it for the reason that's prohibited, he really wants to water his field, he really wants to prepare his field for plowing, then afal pisha maisav mechichin shelitzarich heter oisa, so that even if he does it in a way where it looks to everybody like he's doing it for purposes of heter, so even if he goes ahead and he breaks all the branches for his animal off of one side of the tree, so when somebody looks, he says, nah, he's not pruning his tree, that's not the way you prune a tree, but he really wants to prune his tree, he really is pruning his tree, that's asur. V'chenim kavanosil inyan heter, and so too the other way. Let's say, yeah, his kavana is for the purposes of heter, ve'en ma'asav meichichin alav, but he's not doing it in a way where people see that what he's doing is mutter. Aser. In both of those cases, if you're missing either factor, then it's not mutter, then it's aser on Chol HaMoed. Okay, I'm not going to finish the page, which distresses me a little bit. But we're already 45 minutes in, and I have to go to Licht. I have to light Chanukah Licht. So we're going to stop over here. Mirz Hashem. Next week we will pick up with Sif Yud Beis. A freiliche lichtige Chanukah to everyone. Everyone should have a freiliche Chanukah, a Chanukah Mole Simcha. And I have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. The Rabbanim Shem should be making against Klal Yisrael. The schus of limud HaTorah. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Kol Tzedek. Let's remember, Kiner Mitzvah V'Torah Or, the Chanukah Licht, that little Lichtala. Rav Gedalia Shor writes that Chanukah is the Yom Tov of Torah Shabbal Peh. It's a D'Rabbanan Dika Yom Tov. It's a Yom Tov of Torah. It's specifically a Yom Tov of Torah Shabbal Peh. So we should all be mischazik and limud HaTorah. Be well.